Joining us now, political reporter with the Philadelphia Inquirer, Julia Taruso, senior writer at The Dispatch and author of In Trump's Shadow, David Drucker, politics reporter and author of Semaphor's Americana newsletter, the man we just name-checked, Dave Weigel, and New York Times reporter and MSNBC contributor, Jeremy Peters. Dave, I'm going to begin with you. I gave you the last word in this opening soliloquy into this show. Tell me what you're seeing in swing states and what voters are hearing.
Well, seeing in swing states and seeing in the buys these campaigns are doing, which ads are they running? The Harris campaign actually has very economy-focused ads boiling down her basic promises, the promises on housing, the promises to crack down on price gouging, more health care access, Medicare covering home care. You're hearing that all the time if you're watching TV or just looking on YouTube in these swing states. The democracy message has been a response, remember, to not to what Democrats are saying, but to reporting about what Mark Milley thought of Donald Trump in Bob Woodward's book. That is some of the earned messaging. What the campaign has tried to do, and you heard a little bit of this last night, was blend together that argument, Trump can't serve as president again, we can't let him back in that role given what his former employees have said, with, and I'm going to give you economic benefits. And the Trump campaign has some of that, but you watch their ads, they're often 50-50. The first 15 seconds are attacking Harris over transgender policies, attacking her, blaming her for the Biden economy, sometimes misleading about what she's actually done. For example, one ad that says she's going to keep Biden's border, when the full quote they're referring to is that she's going to keep the border restrictions the last few months. And then they go into that with, and he's going to cut your taxes and make life more affordable. So the daily discussion, the insult contests, etc., those don't make it onto the air as much. And that says what the campaigns think is actually clicking.
Here's the thing about campaign ads. Once you put them on TV, you don't really have to be truthful unless you're inciting violence. There isn't a rule. There isn't a federal rule that you have to tell the truth, and broadcast networks can't say no to those ads. They have to air them. It's really interesting. So you can get away with quite a lot. Julia, tell me what you're seeing. I mean, you live there in Philadelphia. You're in Pennsylvania. What are you seeing out there? What are you hearing from voters?
Yeah, I mean, voters on the ground are, I think, anxious. They feel that the stakes are high. They've just been inundated here for months and months and months. And I think there is some fatigue creeping in from just seeing ad after ad after ad. I think Harris's campaign is hoping that closing argument about democracy works, but she is running a lot of ads about the economy, which remains the biggest issue for voters here. And I do hear voters kind of struggling with those two things. They'll say, I don't like Donald Trump. I didn't like what January 6th represented, but I like his policies and I'm worried about my grocery bills. So, that's the kind of balance they're trying to strike, and that is what I hear from voters here too.
Jeremy, there has been this hand-wringing about, Kamala Harris going too hard on the Trump's a danger to democracy. There's been some Democratic polling that has said that that's not the most effective messaging to independent voters, people who are still deciding, to voters generally as well. It only really works when it's coming from people who worked with Donald Trump, like the John Kellys, the Jim Mattises, and the Mark Milleys of the world. Is this hand-wringing something that you're seeing extend to the worry maybe within the Kamala Harris campaign, or no?
So I think you can follow polls and message testing out the window, right? Yeah. There's only so much that can really tell you. I do think that Dave is right, as usual, with the fascist messaging, right?
Yeah.
Most Americans have no idea what the word fascist means. They know it's bad, but that's not going to be effective for somebody, the very few who are left, who are trying to decide between Trump and Harris. Those voters are people who last time held their nose and voted for Biden, and this time are likely to hold their nose and vote for Trump again. And you reach those by ads like one that I saw recently, which was extremely effective, I thought. It was of a man talking about his daughter and what kind of world he wanted his daughter to grow up in, and how that wasn't a world with Trump as president, given his history with women and how he treats them, and the issues with choice that we now know are so on voters' minds, on all Americans' minds, really. So there has to be a certain nuance to the messaging that I don't think people who are following the race at the most macro level, like you and I probably are, can see, because we're not sitting in, watching TikTok or streaming television in, Macomb County, Michigan.
Yeah, I say this to all my friends and loved ones who ask me what's going to happen. I genuinely have no idea, because I'm not on the road every day. I'm not talking to voters every day. I'm not in environments where I see a lot of signs. I'm not getting a cab talking to my cab driver. They usually have a good feel of what might happen in the country. David, you are traveling the country, though. You're getting a much better sense of things than I am. Weigh into this discussion.
Well, that's what's so funny about this is I am on the road, and I still can't get quite a good sense of it. I get conflicting reports and conflicting vibes from Democrats and Republicans who both feel good, but for different reasons. And, I kind of boil this down to, in the closing days, of voters knowing what they're going to get from Donald Trump, and they're worried they're not going to like it. And voters not sure what they're going to get from Kamala Harris and worried they're not going to like it. And so, what I found so fascinating about Harris's speech on the Ellipse Tuesday evening was when she said, "I know some of you still may not know me that well." And then she tried to introduce herself yet again. This is the peril of launching a late campaign, which at first you get a burst of enthusiasm, and yet she's had to make all of the mistakes late and all of the errors late and do all of the good stuff late, the policies, the introductions. Donald Trump, everybody's decided, they know who he is, and it's just a matter of if they want to go down that road again. And voters I talk to are very conflicted, and in a race this tight, it's really hard to get a gut feel.
Julia, tell me about the turnout so far, the early voting turnout in Pennsylvania. How's it looking for both parties?
Yeah, I think as expected, the Republican Party here and in other states made a big push to try to encourage their party to use mail-in ballots, and we're seeing more of those now. Democrats still outnumbering Republicans. We're also seeing fewer all-around mail ballots than we did in 2020, which I think is also was expected because we're not in the pandemic right now. And we're seeing a lot of adjustments being made to deal with a lot of people trying to get those ballots kind of at the last minute. So there's definitely interest, a little less perhaps than 2020, but a little less of a gap, too.
Julia, I know you've been reporting on just what's been resonating with voters on the Trump side of things, the bro culture. I'm going to give this one to Dave first, though. You heard Nikki Haley warning against too much bro culture coming from Donald Trump, saying that it's going to turn off voters, calling Kamala Harris nasty names, using pimps to describe her handlers. All of this stuff is just ugly and it's unnecessary. Nikki Haley is usually somebody who she was very against Donald Trump until she wasn't after he won. She was very against Donald Trump in the primary, and then she stopped being very against him after it became clear that to stay within the Republican Party after she dropped out, she might need to have a better relationship with him. I'm not trying to say she's transactional, but does she go where the wind blows? Could she be seeing something, Dave?
Well, imagine an election that Trump loses or where he underperforms in the polls by 1 point. That would be a loss. I think part of the story would be this is a campaign, unlike 2016, unlike 2020, that was much more cloistered in conservative media and in bro, that's a good word to use for it, kind of bro podcast media. Trump has spent hours and hours talking to very friendly interviewers who say the sorts of things that maybe you wouldn't say if you were talking to a bunch of women in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. You heard that at Madison Square Garden. You heard that at the rally. There are things that in that sphere, in that podcast world, they're not offensive because the whole premise is that comedy should be legal. You should be allowed to say what you want. But they might actually be offensive to some people who are not very online or no matter where they get their news from, don't like the idea of this sort of mindset taking over the country for 4 years. That is a risk. And you've seen some denial in the last couple of days when canvassers hear that hear back that there are some women they've talked to who don't want their husbands, I should say, to know they're voting for Harris. There's denial. Oh, that can't be happening. I've seen it. I've been out with canvassers and seen some of this. I've heard this from focus groups. If there is a Harris win that surprises people, part of that would be this shy vote that she's done a very diligent job courting, and Trump did not do as much of a job courting despite the occasional feint in that direction.
David, you on that?
Yeah, I think that's what's so interesting about this campaign and why it's hard to gauge is because Harris and Trump are running two different campaigns. The bromance, as Nikki Haley put it, is the point for Donald Trump. He is courting young men, both white and non-white, and that's his whole plan to bring out low propensity voters, meaning people who don't vote that often, to the polls and enlarge his base. And what is Kamala Harris doing? She is going after your traditional group of voters that are reliable, women who vote in larger numbers than men. And look, I'm here in Scottsdale, suburban Phoenix, at an early voting site, and there has been, in this state and others, a robust Harris effort to court disaffected Republicans. In other words, she has been moving to the center, at least stylistically. This is what normally happens in a general election campaign, but Harris is doing her thing, and Trump is doing his thing. And so we can't say that, well, Harris is doing better at the same thing than Trump or vice versa, because they're doing two different things, which means somebody's theory of the case is going to turn out to be correct. We just don't know yet who that is.
Trump's team has always said they're good at the low propensity voter. The bro voter, not necessarily the highest turnout voter.
Well, remember that in 2020, Trump and his campaign found an extra 7 million people who didn't vote in 2020, and I didn't think that that was possible. So who knows, really?
Yeah.
I mean, and in a game of inches like this is why you're seeing so many different messages. It's not that these campaigns are disorganized or don't know what message to settle on. It's that it's that close that you have to try to reach all sorts of people, because any demographic could really make the difference.